And every day we get more and more evidence that Trump's agenda is losing Republican support outside of the MAGA base. Trump angered members of his own party by mishandling the release of the Epstein files, an issue Trump blundered so badly that a majority of Republicans now say they think this government is hiding something. Look at those numbers. Trump launched a disastrous war in Iran, a war that is so unpopular that only 46% of Republicans think the operation has been successful. Trump's war drove up gas prices so fast and so high that even a majority of Republicans now say Trump is to blame. Trump is insistent on punishing Republicans who cross him because he knows that if he doesn't, they will have every incentive to turn on him in order to save themselves. Let's not forget that the entire reason today's contested primary is even happening is because Trump is scared of losing the midterms. So scared that he demanded Republicans rig their maps to engineer their victory. Here was former Transportation Secretary and Indiana native Pete Buttigieg on that very point at a rally in Indianapolis just last year.
We are here because Indiana Republicans are being pressured by Washington Republicans to do something that they know in their hearts is wrong. They are being pressured to change the rules so that voters don't have a say anymore, and they know that that is wrong. And we know why they're doing it, which is because the agenda of Washington Republicans is so unpopular that even here in Indiana, they're afraid of losing if they have to run on a fair map.
That was back in September. And joining me now is former Transportation Secretary and former Mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Pete Buttigieg. I mean, it is, first of all, it's great to see you. You are from Indiana. I just played, it's great. Yeah, it's great to see you. I just played that clip of you calling out what the Trump administration was up to way back in September. This has been going on that long. I think it's important for people to remember. And now 5 Trump-backed candidates have now won their races. One incumbent has hung on. One is still in the air. I wonder what you make of the results tonight. And more importantly, I wonder how you think about the significance of really what we've seen over the last several months in Indiana.
Well, it was striking to see just how much money the Republican Party had to put into Indiana, millions and millions of dollars, against Republicans just to police the boundaries of their own coalition, because a number of them blew off President Trump and blew off J.D. Vance for the reasons that as we described in that rally, had to do with them knowing that they were being pressured to do something wrong. I think the biggest difference between what it felt like back in September and now is that it's not just a series of unpopular policies. That's been true the whole time. Most Americans disagree with the Republican agenda in Congress of cutting taxes for the wealthy and cutting services for the rest of us. But what's really mounted now is how much the results are also failing. We've lived with the price of the tariffs, and now we've also lived with the fact that they failed to restore manufacturing jobs in the country. We have now been living with the consequences of this Iran war and living with the increased price in everything from mortgage rates going up to diesel, where I live in Michigan, hitting an all-time high. All is a direct consequence of the White House and congressional Republicans. So, that dynamic continues, and it's why in a season when they should be doing everything they can to beat Democrats, they instead had to deploy millions of dollars just to beat existing Republicans and replace them with other Republicans, all because the president was mad at them.
Yeah, it's like, congratulations on your $12 million you spent to replace some Republicans with other Republicans. Good job when you're at risk of losing the House, the Senate, and gubernatorial seats. Let me ask you something. We have talked before about sort of what politics could be, what we all hope it will be again. I mean, these Republicans in Indiana.
Donald Trump keeps claiming that he aced a test designed to spot the early signs of dementia, but the doctor who designed that test just burst his bubble, and I have all the details for you next. The evidence of Trump's dance with decline is building, so let's begin with a brutal conversation that just happened on the Daily Beast podcast. Have a listen as Joanna Cole and David Rothkopf point out some of the recent markers, and then I'll share the test doctor pushing back on the spin master.
And watching Donald Trump walk from Marine Force One with his son, it appeared as if the president was compressing himself. His neck has disappeared. And I remember Steve Bannon said he thought he looked like a giant shrimp. I think he looks more like a bison with that kind of. He's got no neck. What's happened to his neck? The president looks terrible.
He's fading. He's failing. He's fading physically. He's fading mentally. He can't handle things. You know, he said today in an interview, "Oh, I do Iran over again." I don't think he even remembers what he did in the first place. He doesn't know how to get out of what he's doing on Iran. The Supreme Court rules one thing on tariffs. He says, "No, we're going to have 25% more tariffs on Europe," even though it's a disaster. His political numbers are a disaster. And, you know, when I think of all of this, and I think of, you know, Trump decaying before our very eyes, and also day after day doing himself in, you know, to me, the headline is, you don't need James Comey to call for somebody to 86-47. Trump is 86ing himself. We're watching him dissolve before our very eyes.
He's running out of time, which I think is a line from Hamilton, isn't it?
We talk a lot about Trump, but I don't think we should ever completely set aside the fact that he's an idiot. You know, I mean, you know, he's a bad guy, and he's decaying, and he's demented, and he has, you know, he's got certain horrible impulses, but he's also an idiot. He's got something in his brain, and unless the guy actually says the word Trump, he doesn't hear it.
He doesn't hear it. Unless it's about himself, he doesn't hear it. And it was also fascinating watching Melania standing next to him. I mean, 2 weeks after she gave her very peculiar speech about not knowing Jeffrey Epstein. And there she was again, and he's trying to reach for her hand, and she's flicking it away. And then she finally takes it when they have to walk down the stairs, because she knows he needs to cling on to her to walk down the stairs. He wasn't right next to a banister. So that was a sort of semi-tragic moment too, because her disdain for him is really very clear. Very clear.
It was so horrible to watch her flick his hand away so that he couldn't hold her hand, and she's sitting there stone-faced. It was just, I mean, you almost, and not quite, but almost felt something for Trump.
And now for our featured story. The doctor who created that cognitive exam Trump frequently cites is feeling something, and that is the need to correct the odd man's frequent lies about the test. The Daily Beast reports, Trump 79 bizarrely boasts he can correctly identify a squirrel. The president doesn't even understand the purpose of test he's taken. President Donald Trump has boasted about his performance on a cognitive screening test.
There's a scene playing out inside the Republican Party right now that doesn't have clean historical parallel, and it's worsening with the specifics rather than reaching for the usual frameworks. A sitting president, 18 months into his second term, running historically low approval numbers, prosecuting an authorized and unpopular war, spent millions of dollars in a single state's primary elections not to defeat Democrats, but to discipline members of his own party for insufficient loyalty. He won most of the races, and that victory is being treated as a demonstration of strength when it is, by any serious political measure, a demonstration of profound structural weakness. Pete Buttigieg's framing on this is blunt and essentially correct. Congratulations on spending $12 million to replace some Republicans with other Republicans, while your party is staring down on a midterm environment that is looking increasingly catastrophic. The resource allocation alone tells you something important about where the Republican Party actually is right now. You don't spend that kind of money on the internal policing when you are governing from a position of confidence. You spend it when you are afraid that the coalition is looser than it looks. Where was I? Afraid that the policy results are going to make the 2026 map genuinely competitive in places it shouldn't be, afraid that elected officials who are thinking about their own political survival might start doing exactly that. And the underlying fear is justified. The numbers Buttigieg is citing aren't marginal. A majority of Republicans now saying they believe the government is hiding something about the Epstein files on an issue that Trump personally botched is a remarkable data point. 46% of Republicans saying the Iran operation has been successful means that a majority of his own base on his own war has concluded it isn't working. That is not opposition research. That's the president's coalition telling pollsters anonymously what they actually think. And a majority of Republicans now attributing the gas prices spike to Trump directly. After years of conditioning that trained Republican voters to assign blame for economic pain anywhere except the current Republican administration, representing a genuine shift is how accountability is being processed even within the base. The tariff failure adds another layer that doesn't get discussed with sufficient specify. The pitch was explicit and concrete. Tariffs will restore American manufacturing jobs. That was not a vague cultural promise or an aspirational slogan. It was a specific claim about economic cause and effect. 18 months in, those jobs haven't materialized in any measurable way, and the cost of the tariff regime embedded in consumer prices, in mortgage rates, in diesel costs, are being paid by exactly the voters who were supposed to be the beneficiaries. When the policy promise fails on its own state terms, the blame Biden reflex becomes not just intellectually dishonest but politically counterproductive because it implicitly acknowledges that the current administration doesn't have a solution. You can blame your predecessor or you can governor. You can really do both simultaneously and be taken seriously. The Spirit Airlines example is almost too perfect as an illustration. An airline goes under because jet fuel costs have spiked due to an ongoing military conflict in the Persian Gulf. The airline's own management points to fuel prices as the primary driver. The Trump administration's response is to reach back 3 years and blame a Biden-era antitrust proceeding. This is not a sophisticated political argument. It is not even a coherent one. And in a media environment where cause and effect chains are increasingly visible and traceable, making the argument publicly isn't just unconvincing. It actively signals to observers that the administration has no credible alternative explanation and knows it.